officially begin. Awesome. So if you want to move to the next slide, Sabrina, we're going to be talking today about what to do at the time of relapse. And when Paul and I got together to talk about, what topics we should hit on, Paul brought up what to do at the time of relapse because it's always better if you're prepared, even if you are in remission. It's so smart to be aware of what's going to happen when that relapse comes. You want to be empowered, you want to be educated, and those of us who have already experienced a relapse, maybe sharing stories of what our doctors did and what worked and what didn't, we're able to find better treatments for us if we have relapse. So that's the topic for today. I'm really excited to talk about it. And before we begin, I want to thank our community sponsors. They are Bristol Myers Squibb, Amgen Oncology, Karyopharm Therapeutics, AbbVie, Adaptive Biotechnologies, Genentech Oncopeptides, and Takeda Oncology. And just a short announcement that I am going to have to leave halfway through this event because we have another event right after this that I need to start. Horrible timing, and I'm going to make sure that it doesn't happen again like this in a couple months from now because I want to be a part of this group. I want to hear what you have to say. But I just wanted to let you know about that. So we can stop sharing the slides now. Thank you, Sabrina, for your help today. And we can jump into Jay's good news, and then we'll be able to start with today's topic. So Jay, share with us.
Well, last time we were on, I think I had just had my bone marrow biopsy. I had it on January 25th. I don't remember when when the last day was. And I was waiting for the results, and I got the results the following week. I saw my oncologist at Levine Cancer Institute, and my bone marrow biopsy showed that I was in stringent complete remission and MRD negative. They looked at over 11 million cells, and there was not a single plasma cell to be found, zero. Wow. So somebody asked on another page, Facebook page, I think it was a multiple myeloma page, they asked, well, after you had your bone marrow biopsy, what were did you still have the same deletions or duplications as before? And I asked my oncologist last week about that, and he said, no, there weren't any plasma cells, so they couldn't do the fission. None there. So I'm doing fine. I'm on maintenance with Cripolis and Revlimid, and I'm feeling fine. I walked, over 12,000 steps yesterday.
Wow.
And I'm wanting to go back to work. I had my first COVID vaccine a couple weeks ago, and I'm going to get the second one next week. I'm a family physician, and my organization, they're worried about me going back to work. I'm not worried about going back to work. I'll start my 6-month immunizations probably in May. I'm wanting to go back to work. The only thing that's holding me back is COVID, really. And as things open up more, hopefully I'll be able to get back to work pretty soon. So
great to hear.
I feel pretty good, and things are going great.
Good. Thank you so much for sharing your good news with us. All right, I'm going to turn the time over to Paul, and then Paul's going to kind of talk more about what we're going to talk about today, and then we'll get started.
Jay, I have a question for you. On the Kyprolis, how frequently are you dosed?
I get that every other week.
Okay.
I go in for an infusion. It's supposed to be a 30-minute infusion, but my total time there ends up being about 2.5, 3 hours because they draw my labs, then they have to wait an hour for them to come back. And then whenever they come back, then they have to send it to the pharmacy and wait an hour for the pharmacy to send up my medicine. And then I get a 30-minute infusion and go home. And I'm on the Revlimid 21 days off 7 days.
What kind of milligrammage?
10.
Okay.
with the baby aspirin.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
Yep.
With
Yeah,
the baby aspirin. All right.
Yeah, and my doctor, he's not a big fan of Dex. He doesn't see a big advantage of that. So I'm thankful for that. So at least I could sleep.
Yeah, well, I had the same experience that, I actually thought that Dex was the worst of the three drug combination I started out on for the same reason. You just can't sleep and you just get so overtired.
Oh yeah.
And I was, very happy to hear that in maintenance, I also could skip the Dex. So that works.
I read something last week that somebody, instead of using Dex, there was a physician that was using Solumedrol instead. And I don't know what dose, but the patient, this is just anecdotally, said that the patient, didn't have the insomnia that they got from Dex with the Solumedrol. So
now the Solumedrol, that's a depot injection, isn't it?
it can be given. It can be given as an injection or an infusion. I've given that in my office.
Yeah, oh, I see. Okay. Interesting. Well, in Europe, you see reports that sometimes prednisone is used instead of Dex.
Yes.
So it's it seems like the Americans are very wedded to Dex, but the Europeans are not so much, it seems.
And that's interesting because we just had a question in our selinexor group yesterday where somebody asked, are we using anything besides Dex because it's made me gain 20 pounds in 1 month and it's just awful, those steroid days. And the nurse was adamant, like, no, we don't use anything besides Dex. And I was like, that was very American of her to say.
It's a steroid. That's kind of like, if someone has poison ivy and I give them some folks use a Medrol dose back, which is dexamethasone, and I use a Sterapred dose back, which is prednisone. And some folks do better than one with the other. Who knows?
Yeah, interesting. Well, what I'd like to talk about today is probably not a real, it could be an exciting subject, but it may not be, is what kind of discussions have we had with our physicians as to what they expect to do or what they would recommend at time of relapse. Usually PCL patients are given fairly short timelines of, you expect that you're going to relapse within the next 12 to 18 months, things like that. And so you start worrying, well, what's next? You're a recent graduate, Jay, so I'm not sure if you've had that kind of discussion at Levine yet. By the way, at Levine, who's your physician? Is it Saad Usmani or one of Saad's wing people?
It's one of his colleagues. Shebly Atrash. And we had the he said, with my stem cell transplant, he said hopefully if we get a year it would be great. If we get 2 years, he'd be ecstatic. But I'm not waiting for the shoe to drop. I'm just go day by day and cross that bridge whenever I get there.
Yeah. Well, on the flip side, Jay, my own experience, and I may have mentioned it last time. I came out of my second transplant as strange incomplete response, MRD negative, and I've been at that point for 6.5 years now. And my original timeline was, well, if it can get you to 12 months, that'd be average. If it get you to 18 months, that'd be great. And so every time I see my physician, she just says, I don't know what to tell you. It's like, you're somewhere out there. We see it very rarely. We don't understand why. But, all I can tell you is my experience mirrors yours, Jay. So I hope for you that your long-term experience is going to mirror mine too. So, again, we may have had these discussions, and a lot of us are being treated typically at outstanding cancer centers with well-known specialists. And I think it'd be good to share a little bit as to, what our docs are telling us. And after that's done, I want to get into some interesting case reports that have been published over the past 2 months about the use of selinexor in relapsed PCL. That seemed to be pretty exciting. And, maybe we can close out a little bit as to, I want to talk for about 2 minutes about the upcoming approval of the first CAR T for myeloma. That may become an option for us too. So, I'm looking at the Morris family there. And Judith, I have your name show up. I'm sorry, I forgot your husband's name.
Steve.
Steve. So, Judith and Steve, have you had a discussion with, and I think, Steve, you're the patient, right?
You're muted.
Yeah, you're
unmute.
I'm the patient. Yeah.
You're a patient. So have you had the discussion with your physician as to what they expect to do at time of relapse?
No.
Okay.
So share, I don't know if you guys want to share kind of what you shared in the last group about your concerns. I think this would be also a good group to share those concerns, especially as you're getting, as you're weighing your options.
Well, the reason he hasn't had the discussion, this is his caretaker wife, is because he's getting ready for transplant. He hasn't had a transplant yet.
I see. Okay.
So and to tell you the truth, he's trying to be positive. That's what he tells me all the time. And he doesn't want to think of relapse right now, even though we're attending all these things because he does have plasma cell leukemia.
Mm-hmm.
So he is high risk for relapse after and he's also 17 years old.
Mm-hmm.
He's being treated at Vanderbilt in Nashville, Tennessee.
Okay.
And actually, they were not too thrilled with doing a transplant on a 79-year-old. He just started consultations. He had a geriatric evaluation, and in 2 weeks he decided this is something we could use your advice on. He's having a cardiac, pulmonary, bone marrow biopsy, and his chemo all on the same day. I personally don't think that's a great idea, but he wanted to get it all over with.
Well, it's actually kind of par for the course, Steve. Typically the pre-transplant evaluations. I mean, I had the same thing. I do the cardiac, the pulmonary. I think they threw in a CT PET for good measure, and I was doing my daily quote unquote chemo too between the Revlimid and the Dex. It was all piled on top of each other. So all I can say is welcome to the club. There's, nothing. I think all of us can cheer. And I see Jay is chuckling. He's probably gone through exactly the same thing. It is what it is, really.
These are innocuous tests. I don't worry about that. The thing that I'm not exactly sure yet, even this is my 4th month of treatment, where I fit in. I still can't understand the nomenclature. For instance, the original diagnosis was multiple myeloma with plasma cell leukemia. Then And with the genetic workup, I was at the good genes, so whatever. But after 2 cycles, all of the plasma cell leukemia cells are gone, 100%. So now I don't know if I consider myself
in the blood.
A plasma cell leukemia in remission or multiple myeloma patient or what. So you know, it's a little confusing. I'm just a little old dentist. I don't know too much about you.
Well, I actually had a similar experience, Steve, that I had a very good response after 2 cycles. And, you know, at Duke, and still, you know, even as quote unquote, as well as I'm doing right now, they still basically label me as primary plasma cell leukemia without having achieved a remission, even though I'm strangely complete response, MRD negative. So I think once you got that label of PCL, you know, I think that's going to stick with you. And apparently, and I've read that before, that PCL patients tend to respond better and faster with early treatment compared to myeloma patients. So you see these, you know, these great responses that you're seeing, but you know, there is such a high risk of a very rapid return of the disease that they put you through the ringer to make sure that indeed everything is, you know, pretty much everything is killed off.
They made me understand that right from day one, that no matter what I do, I have to start like yesterday.
Yeah.
Wow.
Where I go, it was important.
Can you tell us what MRD is? There's a lack of communication at Vanderbilt, and no matter how we try, you go every webcast we've been on, everyone seems so knowledgeable about their disease. And we've watched some videos, we've been on some of these, but I just find that they don't really explain things that well. I don't go to Steve's appointments, but I'm always on speakerphone when he's the doctor and everything. And when I try to ask some questions, they're always like, "Well, I have to move on."
It's very difficult because the consults are at clinic time, so you know the physicians are seeing their patients, you know.
Yeah. Well, so when you say Vanderbilt, you're really talking about Sarah Cannon, right?
No. Sarah Cannon.
Really?
Totally
separate
institution.
It's a private hospital.
Vanderbilt is Vanderbilt from.
I see. Okay. Interesting.
Eric.
Well, you asked the question about MRD. MRD stands for minimum residual disease. And Jay gave us a really nice example earlier in the afternoon when he said they basically, you know, took a blood sample. They ran 11 million cells in Jay's case through this machine that literally counts each and every plasma cell that, you know, flow by it. And after 11 million, Jay came up with a good 0, which is a terrific place to be. At Duke, they typically, you know, pull the equivalent of 2 million cells. And you know, the name of the game, there's kind of different levels of MRD negativity. Sometimes some people say, well, you're MRD negative. In other words, there's very few cancer cells. If you have one cell, less than 1 cell per 100,000, that is as a cancer's plasma cell. But these days, more and more institutions are looking for less than 1 cell per million to give you the label of MRD negative. In other words, your residual disease is almost undetectable. That's what MRD means.
And also to add to that just a little bit, not everybody, I totally know what you mean, where everybody seems really knowledgeable about their disease, but the majority of them are not. And I just want you to know you're not alone. And there's nothing wrong with that. I love that you're asking questions.
Okay.
Another thing is, not everybody gets an MRD test because it's pretty expensive. And not all of the institutions are really on board with it right now. From the majority of patients that I've talked to, they really have to push sometimes to get MRD testing from their physicians. So that's something to keep in mind too, of why you might not have heard about it from Vanderbilt, or why you haven't been getting questions answered.
For a second, do they do that MRD test only at time of bone marrow biopsy? Or how else would they test?
Yes and no. You can do MRD testing on bone marrow, and you can do MRD testing on circulating blood.
Mhm.
And the testing on circulating blood is not as quote unquote accurate or fairly decent. I'm going to say that fairly decent approximation. And it's obviously easier on the patient, but the gold standard is to do it on bone marrow.
Is that when they do it on your blood, is that called cytometry test?
No, flow cytometry is something very different. And I'm actually looking at Jay as our resident physician here. Flow cytometry, Jay, correct me if wrong, I think is also looks for cancerous cells, but not to the same level that MRD testing does.
Because he said, but no one has ever mentioned MRD to us. Now I'm going to ask next time.
But flow cytometry is something pretty much every time you're going to go to Vanderbilt, they will do a flow cytometry on you.
A good thing to ask or to check, Judy and Steve, would be to see what are the abnormalities consistent with your disease. For instance, I am IgA and free lambda light chain. That's what those were the things that whenever I was diagnosed that were very elevated. So those are the things I look at whenever they check myeloma markers through the lab test, and then I could go on the portal from Atrium and see those results and see how they're doing, and that's how I kind of gauge it. So you'll see on myeloma sites where people will talk about M-spike. I've asked my oncologist about M-spike. I don't know. I don't understand M-spike. There's nothing that says a lab test that says M-spike.
Right.
Now he puts in his note, that there's no M-spike by SPEP, but there's no lab test to do that. And I asked him about it before, and he says he doesn't really worry about it. He looks more at the IgA level, and he gave me a graph which showed that it was very high and then came down to low. And then he showed me one with my free lambda light chain, which was 13,000 whenever it started, is down to 20 or something like that. And that's very low. So put it in simple terms, but ask them, what do you look at as far as your markers to see how you're doing with treatment? And that's what I want to know primarily. How am I doing, and if those go up or down? And that kind of is my gauge.
Thank you. That's good. We'll ask them.
But just put it in simple terms that you could understand, and things that you could follow.
So going back to kind of where we started, what are our physicians telling us in terms of what to do next at the time of relapse? Steve and Judith, you guys are still very early on in the process. I see two other people have joined us, Misty Duke and Mary Pearson. Misty, maybe you can talk a little bit about what your physician may be telling you as to what he or she expects to do at time of relapse.
Actually, I'm the caregiver. It's my husband that has it, and he has relapsed, and they have put him on a 4 medicine regimen. He was only on 3, and they've added a new one to see if they can get his M protein down, because that's what they monitor is his M protein.
So would it be fair to assume that the 4th one that was added, is that by any chance Darzalex?
He is on Darzalex. He's on dexamethasone, Pomalyst, and Capralis.
Wow.
And he gets Capralis for 3 weeks straight, and he's off a week, and then he gets the Darzalex once a month.
Wow, that's a pretty tough regimen.
Yeah.
How long has your husband been doing this, if I may ask?
He just started he relapsed in July of last year, and they put him on Darzalex and dexamethasone and Pomalyst, and then his numbers started spiking up, and they've just now put him back on the Capralis.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But he was diagnosed in 2018. So we've had tandem stem cell transplant, and we've been through all this treatment.
Wow.
And how are you doing, Misty?
I'm doing okay. I'm
Yeah.
doing okay. It gets rough sometimes, but
Yeah.
I just have faith that the Lord's going to take care of him, because we have a 14-year-old, and
Yeah.
there's still a lot of things we want to do as a family. So
Yeah. Oh man, my thoughts and prayers are with you guys then. That I agree with Paul. That sounds like a really tough regimen, not only for your husband, but also for you guys.
But
as
do you
well.
know, it doesn't make him sick or anything. He just gets fatigue. But as far as being sick, none of the regimens they've had has made him sick.
Wow.
Praise the Lord.
Now, when was he first diagnosed?
December of 18. And we did the 4-month, let's see, we did Capralis, Revlimid, and Dex for 4 months, and then he went to Harvest stem cells, and they got 12 million stem cells. So he has enough for 4 transplants, but his doctor will only do 2. We're also at Sarah Cannon, so we're not far from where Judith is.
Okay. Interesting.
I have to hop off, but it's so great to see you guys, and I will see you in a couple months, or I'm sure I'll see you before then. But it's great to see you guys, and I can't wait to watch the rest of the recording and see what you guys.
We'll see you, Audrey. Mary Pearson, how about you? Are you the patient or the caregiver?
I'm a patient.
You're the patient.
Yes.
And
I'm pretty new at this. So I was smoldering myeloma as of October last year. And then in February, my lambda light chains got really high. So they started treating me with Velcade, Revlimid, and Dex. So in the 1 month that I've had that format or protocol, my lambda light chains have just about dropped to normal. So I'm in a good place.
Terrific. And then, so you're lined up now for a stem cell transplant?
Well, originally, because I'm in my 70s and I have other health issues, originally they said I would not be a good candidate. However, oddly enough, at this last visit, they started talking about it. So I'm really getting on board. So I think that's something I want to do.
Well, at least two of us on this call, between Jay and myself, we've had good experience and good outcomes with the transplant. So, that's we think it's a good option. At least I think it's a good option. So you're still very early on in the process too, Mary, in terms of where you are, and is it safe to say that you have not yet had a discussion with your physician as to what he or she expects to do for you in the long term?
Well, this last visit last week was we did talk about the stem cell transplant, and I have a specialist at University of Michigan who would probably set it up for me. But I do have high risk factors. So I'm not going to sit still and wait to see what happens. I'm going to get out there and do something. So I'm just hoping that the stem cell transplant can get rid of those genetic high risk factors.
Well, I mean, it's quite typical, apparently. I seem to recall that over 50% of the PCL patients have this translocation 1114, which automatically makes us pretty much high risk. Well, PCL makes us high risk, but we tend to end up with, or with at least with a high chance of having 1114. Jay, at Levine, you've come out of the transplant now, you're doing great. What's your team telling you in terms of what the expectation is, what they're looking to do at time of relapse?
There's what they say. There's so many options available now. As far as new medications, that we just hit the tip of the iceberg with with the maintenance treatment. There's so many other things that, coming on board. There's just a new medication. Well, actually, it's a new formulation of melphalan that was just approved.
Yeah, the melphalan, that's the oncopeptides. It's melphalan plus something else, I think, that's linked together.
Yeah, that was just approved at the end of February. And then CAR T, is coming on board. So there's a lot of options. Whenever I was first presented with having a stem cell transplant, my oncologist was talking about doing a autologous stem cell transplant and then doing a allogenic stem cell transplant. And, I think you had asked, someone had asked before, why did you not do a tandem, an auto? And he said, you've already reached, after the first one, he said, you've already reached stringent complete remission and MRD negativity. What more do you want? Why do it another one?
Sure.
You're not going to gain anything from that. And then he said, with the allogenic, he presented that to me, but he said there were two options after that I could have, either an allogenic or maintenance. I was going to go on maintenance anyhow, but then talked about the, with autologous stem cell transplant, the side effects and it's rough right at the beginning. Within 2 weeks you feel terrible, but then those go away quickly. With the allogenic, you could have long-term problems with graft versus host disease and quality of life issues, and I really wasn't interested in having those potential complications or having long-term effects from the allergenic. So I had been on Cripolis since I was diagnosed. I had been on Revlimid before, and so whenever he said that, I said, "Yeah, that's fine. We'll do that."
Okay.
And I feel good. But he said basically, just when I saw him last week, he said, "I'll see you in 2 months," and he said, "You're doing great. I'll see you in 2 months." He said, "You'll still get labs. If there's anything abnormal before then, I'll let you know. But he said, go on and live your life."
That's that's the way to do it. That'd be my mindset too. Well, in my case at Duke, what I was told that I similarly, and I think it was Misty who mentioned it, that it had a pretty good original harvest, over 12 million cells. And so far, Duke is used in the tandem auto that they've used 7.5 million. I've given 2.5 million cells to Duke for research purposes, but I still have 2.5 million in the in their stem cell bank. And so the plan of action for me is that they would like to go to a salvage transplant, which in essence is a third order transplant with an ablation regimen that is a little on the rough side. As part of her first stem cell, Jay, I'm sure you were just giving melphalan, the half-hour infusion of melphalan. And, that was it, which they call a mini ablation. But, for salvage transplant, they go to whole hog. So you end up, what was explained to me, it's a combination called Big New Beam. It's bendamustine, which is a pretty ugly drug, and then 3 other ones on top of it, including melphalan. And, you end up being hospitalized for 2 or 3 weeks. And, that stuff is basically being given to you on a rotating basis 24/7. And then you go to a regular auto stem cell transplant. And, the rationale of Duke was they've had very good outcomes with that protocol, specifically for PCL. And, my doc says, I really don't want to mess around with, upping your dose or changing your drug combination. Let's just go straight to salvage, because that's what we've had the best experience with. So, that's a totally different thing than, what you've heard here so far. I see somebody else has joined us, Sim Veldboer, which sounds like a very nice Dutch name. Sim, you're still muted.
Yeah, no, I'm not muted anymore. No, that's correct. It's a Dutch name, and I just read the email by, I think it was Audrey, who said, "Please do join us." And I've just arrived because we're planning to move to Italy. My wife's Italian, you see, and okay, I will get an allowance and so on and so forth because a very good social service over here in Holland. We don't get state-of-the-art treatments, unfortunately, which is different in the US as long as you have money. But we do have a very good system, I think. But it's not as good as yours. And so that's it. So I'm a little later, but I'm happy to join now. And
well, it's terrific. Sim, tell us a little bit about yourself. You are a PCL patient.
Not yet, and hopefully it never will become one. So I'm just a MM patient, and it's more that I'd like to participate in virtual these webinars.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not particularly for me, but it's also a thing. What I want to know is, what are we going to do when I will relapse, which hopefully will never happen. But then again, my doctors tell me one way or the other it's going to happen. And at this very moment, I've only had one regimen, so the VTD, 4 times 4 weeks. You're probably familiar with that. I've had 2 stem cell transplants because I have, don't call it severe, you call it an aggressive form of multiple myeloma, the 414 translocation. Fortunately, even already after the 3rd leg of this VTD treatment, there was no M protein measurable, and ever since that time it's been like that. So I'm very, very fortunate about that. And as it is at the moment, I'm on lenalidomide, and that's it. So that's my status. But I do want to know, and of course I will have a conversation with my doctor next Monday because of my blood values. Every 3 months you have this blood, so all looks good as far as I can judge. But still, I'd like to know what are we going to do in Holland when I relapse. But what they do here is they stick to a sort of you might call it best practices a regimen. So it's probably will be something with daratumumab and maybe dexamethasone or whatever when it returns. Whereas in America, you at least have as far as I get it, the opportunity to take other medicine and go and have a conversation with your doctor about it and then see what's the best outcome. And of course, we have good discussions among one another. So me and the doctor is a very nice guy. But the point is they keep to very strict regimens here in Europe in general, because there's also something to do with things have to be, would you call it payable? I mean, of course, we have a very good insurance system, but it also looks at, well, is it affordable? Affordable is a better word, I think.
Yeah.
And so not everything is affordable. And with you in America, of course, is as long as you've got the money, it is affordable. And that's not the way it goes with us. But then again, in our country, everybody is insured. That's the good thing. That's the good thing about it, whether you've got the money or not. So, but still, I want to know, about the different ways, what is possible, what's on the market, what can I do? Maybe I can even participate in a clinical study. I've already asked, I think, Audrey and maybe also Jenny, whether it would be possible to participate in a clinical study in America, if that were to come by. And as far as I understood it, something like that might be possible if there's a clinical study that might be worthwhile for me. Then, of course, I would have to see whether I can find some place to stay and sleep and that sort of thing. But fortunately for me, I'm not in that state at all at the moment. I'm very, very well off, I think, especially compared to many others. But I don't know what the future holds for me. And so I'm looking around already, as you can imagine. So this is more or less my status.
Sim, may I ask you in which institution you're being treated in the Netherlands?
Yeah, it's called the MMC here. It's just the local hospital. And I've had my stem cell transplant in Maastricht, which is in the southeast of the country.
So you're a Limburger then?
No, you're very well informed. I'm not a Limburger at all. I'm from the northwest of our country, which we call West Friesland.
Yeah.
And well, since you're so familiar apparently with the geography, that's where the island starts. You know, I don't know whether you're familiar with the topography of our country. So actually, it's diametrically opposed to where I am now. But I found my wife here. She's Italian, by the way. She lived here. She had been married to another Dutch guy before. And so I moved in with her. And that's how I got to the southeast of the country.
Well, I'm Flemish Limburg.
You're originally from?
I'm originally from the northeast of Flemish Limburg.
That's very, very near where I live, because I live in Eindhoven, which is Brabant.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. Eindhoven.
Yes. I don't know, where were you from? Hasselt or something?
I was born in Hasselt, but I grew up in the small town Bree.
Bree,
B-R-E-E. And that is
Bree. Yeah.
That's about 30 kilometers from Eindhoven, and
Oh,
so
yeah.
yeah, it's a
Oh,
small world.
amazing. But how long have you been living in the States then, Paul?
I've been living here for 46 years.
Oh, I see. So you were quite young when you moved over with your parents, presumably.
Well, no, I immigrated on my own when I was 23.
I see. So you're still fluent in Dutch or in Flemish, that is.
It's fairly fluent. The Limburg dialect I'm fluent in, but for Dutch, I really have to think about my words. But anyway, we're digressing here. So, we were talking about relapsing and stuff. There are two things that, and we have different guidances that we're getting. There are some interesting papers that have come out over the last 2 months with some case reports dealing with relapsed plasma cell leukemia that were very successfully treated with selanexor. And selanexor is basically indicated, it has an indication in the US, a very recent approval and indication for relapsed multiple myeloma for patients with the transcription 1114.
Okay, and I got the 414.
So what we are seeing now, and also patients with the genetic mutation TP53, and I'm quickly looking at my notes here. So there's one paper out there that describes 4 individual case reports of patients that were treated typically with venetoclax and dex. And there were really ugly stories leading them up to relapse. One patient, the first patient that was discussed, relapsed 6 months after transplant, was put on 9 cycles of venetoclax, achieved MRD negative, and is currently doing very well in maintaining MRD negative. So, the drug was used off-label. It's not indicated for PCL, and that was doing well. There's a second case report of a patient with lambda light chain, also with transcription 1114 and the genetic mutation TP53. This patient had a very ugly induction, which is typically used for extremely aggressive PCL, which was Velcade Dex base combination, it's a cocktail of 6 drugs. It's probably about the ugliest induction you can go through. Also relapsed very shortly after that, was put in venetoclax and achieved stringent complete response, MRD negative, within 2 months, and is currently still stringent complete response, MRD negative after 10 months.
Look at that.
A third case report is a patient with kappa light chain, also a high risk, had the deletion of chromosome 17p and also transcription 1114. This patient had a very good partial response with a combination of Kyprolis, Revlimid, and dexamethasone plus an auto stem cell transplant. Relapsed 30 days after the auto transplant, which is somewhat unusual even for PCL, but was put after the relapse, was put on venetoclax, Velcade, and dexamethasone, achieved MRD negative after 1 cycle, and is continuing to stay MRD negative. And then there is another patient, was IgM, immunoglobulin M, also translocation 1114, relapsed after a CAR T, and was put on venetoclax dex and is doing very well. And then the last case report that I have was a case report that was just published a couple of weeks ago The prior case reports I mentioned, the dates that I have and publication dates that I have on those was December 2020. So that's all still very recent. Then there's an interesting case report that was just published 2 or 3 weeks ago, coming out of China. A patient who was not, who did not have the translocation 1114, relapsed after CAR T and achieved very good partial response and is doing well. So, you know, here again, you have a patient who is pretty much at the end of the road with CAR T, relapsed after CAR T, and ended up having a real lifeline with venetoclax. And again, venetoclax is not indicated for PCL at all. So we're starting to see more and more case reports of patients, you know, where apparently venetoclax is working very well with PCL. So, Jay, that's another one, you know, to keep in our quiver here and to keep in mind. And, you know, you talk to your guys, you know, you just may want to broach that subject with them. And then obviously, you know, as another option is CAR T. We do expect the first approval of the Bristol Myers CAR T treatment, the BB2121. That approval could come as early as tomorrow, but most likely not until Monday. They have a Food and Drug Action date of March 27th, which is over the weekend. So we do expect that will be approved in the US. Quote unquote, the problem with that is this is basically relapsed. The approval is for, and the clinicals were run with the specific exclusion of PCL patients. And the approval is expected to for the indication of relapsed myeloma with a relapse to immunomodulators. So we have Revlimid, Talimid, and Pomalyst. Relapse after treatment with proteasome inhibitors, which would mean Kyprolis, either Kyprolis, Velcade, or Ninlaro, and also relapsed after treatment with monoclonal antibodies targeting CD38, which is basically, I think, elotuzumab and Darzalex. So, you know, you're looking at triple refractory patients, again, with a specific triple refractory myeloma patients, again, with the specific exclusion of PCL. But I do think that in clinical practice, we may see this thing becoming tried out for PCL at some point in time. But that would be under a specific protocol that would be separately, you know, they basically need to go to an institutional review board. You need to get a specific approval from Food and Drug to use it for a new indication. And you need, obviously, you also need to get the okay from Bristol Myers, you know, for that kind of a trial. So, but either way, you know, there are a couple of new things in the mix. Jay, you mentioned earlier CAR T. I've just thrown in venetoclax. So there are some other things that, you know, can be of use for us. Sim, you came in a little later. This is a group that, you know, is not really for multiple myeloma in general, but for an extremely aggressive variant of multiple myeloma called primary plasma cell leukemia. Mm-hmm. In the Netherlands, typically, you know, the incidence rate of PCL is something like 4 patients per year per 10 million inhabitants. So for the Netherlands, you probably have 5 or 6 newly diagnosed PCL patients per year. In the US, it's about 130. So that's it. But specifically for you, Sim, if you're moving to Italy, there's a lot of good work being done on PCL in Italy coming out of Milan and out of Bologna.
Okay.
So if you're looking for at some point in time for places to go to, the northern part of Italy is they probably have more practice with PCL than anybody else in Italy.
Okay. Well, we intend to go to the north because Patricia, my wife, she's from the north, from Varese, so we'll be very near Milan anyway. So, and I have to look for a hospital there, of course, because
I will
complicated to keep.
I will make a mental note of it and see if I can find out which hospital it is that deals with PCL in Milan, and we'll try and get you a message through Audrey.
Okay, that would be very nice. But as I said before, I'm not PCL. I'm just But it would be very nice to have a hospital where they've got expertise and
the two institutions in question, both in Bologna and in Milan, are terrific MM outfits with great research departments, and they also tend to participate in the European clinical trials for the novel drugs.
Okay.
So you should have reasonable access there to
clinical trials. Okay, that sounds good.
Including for CAR-T.
Okay. Well, it sounds very good. Yeah.
I see somebody new joined us, Lisa. We are actually Lisa Keenan or Kenan. I'm not sure what the correct pronunciation is of your last name.
Hi, it's Keenan.
Keenan. Lisa, are you a PCL patient, or maybe are you the caregiver of a PCL patient?
I'm a patient.
You're the patient. This is actually a fairly new group. This is the second time that the PCL group has gotten together. And, our main topic for today is, what are our physicians telling us as to what to expect at time of relapse? Okay. So if you could share a little bit, your saga and where you are in treatment and where you're being treated, that'd be great.
Okay. Well, I was diagnosed in July 2019, and I started so I'm in the UK. I started with chemo within 2 weeks and had 4 rounds of chemo. And then I've had 2 stem cell transplants, one in November 2020 and one in, November 2019 and one in March 2020. So I've had a year. I've had no more treatment since my last stem cell, and I'm sort of in remission at the moment. And I've had a year, thankfully, without any treatment, and just
Lisa,
taking it from there.
If I may interrupt you, you're not in any kind of maintenance treatment at all?
No.
Wow.
Nothing. Well, the only thing I have is an infusion called Zamita, which is for my bones. That's which I have 3 monthly. And that's it at the moment. But
the no maintenance, is that an NHS protocol, or is that your decision?
That's what my doctor told me, that there's some okay, that my levels are sufficient at the moment. It's coming out that I'm in remission, and so it was their decision that I don't need anything. And may I ask you where you're being treated in the UK? I'm in York. I don't know how much you know about the UK.
Yeah, York is northeast, right?
Yes, that's right. Yes, yeah. So I've had some of my treatment in York. I had my stem cell transplants in Leeds, which is a bigger specialist cancer hospital. Okay,
and what are our main discussion topic here today was, what are your physicians telling you in terms of what they expect, how they expect to treat you at time of relapse?
Well, to be honest, we haven't discussed it, and
Wow.
we're just, and you know, so it's just a case of I have 3 monthly blood tests and speak to the consultant after that blood test. And, you know, it's a case of they're just saying, get on, live your life, get on with it, enjoy it while things are going well. And if something comes up from one of the blood tests, we'll look at it again and make a decision then. So we, yeah, so, and I'm happy with that. I'm okay with that.
Okay. All right. I actually think that we have come full circle for today. If anybody else has any additional questions.
Well, I do actually, Paul, because you mentioned some very interesting case reports. And maybe, I don't know whether you could pass these to us or one of this with a link or whatever. And I'd be interested in just one single one. I mean, you know what I've got, the 414, and I know it's all about 1114, and but that doesn't really matter, I think. But at least I got some stuff to substantiate my story when I speak to my doctor on Monday. And
what I will do is I will summarize the 5 case reports that I have at this point in time. They're basically coming out of 2 publications. The Chinese one was a separate publication. The other 4 came out of a single publication. I will summarize them, shoot them over to Audrey, and I will ask Audrey to, you know, scoot them over to you guys. So you have something to refer to and to sort of keep in the back of your minds when you talk to your physicians at time of, you know.
Another question, if you don't
Sure,
mind.
go ahead, Judith.
Have there been any studies to show whether maintenance accelerates your remission versus this lady from the UK who is not having? Now, I know you can't, each patient's different in their diseases, but I'm just curious because we watched something last Saturday, but that was about not plasma cell. But there was a doctor from Hackensack Hospital in New Jersey, but
yeah,
had been at Mount Sinai, who said after transplant, the newest thing is not to put people on maintenance. Now, I understand is different than PCL. I'm just curious because they've already told Steve that he would have to be on maintenance for life because plasma cell is in itself a high risk.
Well, plasma cell leukemia is the most aggressive version of multiple myeloma. And you know, in multiple myeloma, Judith, there's some gradation between less risky and higher risk. And as PCL patients, we are automatically labeled as the highest risk category. So I would be, and I'm absolutely flabbergasted, Lisa, that out of the UK, a PCL patient would not be put on maintenance. I mean, that's even for, it's almost unheard of here in the States.
Okay.
Are
there any other people from the UK here?
No, we have, there's basically a handful of us Americans. Seamus calling in from the Netherlands. So you're the only UK patient.
How often do you test your blood, Lisa?
Sorry, I missed that.
How often do you get your blood test done?
Every 3 months.
That seems also kind of when you get the bone infusion.
Okay. Yeah, I get that every 3 months. I mean, I must admit, looking at the Facebook group, it does seem to me that certainly the American people that post on there, they have a lot more information. They're really sort of, you can get a lot more detailed information and about, everything to do with plasma cell. And so I do feel that maybe the UK people have a different approach to it. The UK doctors, I'm not sure. I know certainly in the hospital that I'm in, my consultant is not a specialist in PCL at all. He didn't know very much about it at all when I was diagnosed. But I don't know. It's difficult. I can only go on what I'm told by my doctors.
Wow. Because there's a pretty good, myeloma center in Manchester, but I realize that that's quite a drive away from York.
Oh, okay. No, it's not. Well, it's not that bad. No, I didn't know that. I didn't even know that there was one.
Yeah, Manchester they do some pretty good work on myeloma, and I also think my wife became acquainted with a UK couple of years ago, whose husband was treated at Manchester, and you see Manchester pop up quite often in research articles too.
Okay,
so
yeah,
that may be something for you to consider here.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yes, thank you. That's funny that you know that and I don't know that.
Okay, and that's okay, guys. That's for me. Now, for the next session, for the PCL group, what's on the docket is a discussion about CAR-T. And the reason why we put it on the docket is with the imminent approval of the Bristol Myers CAR-T treatment in the next couple of days. And we also have a fairly imminent approval of the Johnson & Johnson Legend Biotech CAR-T for multiple myeloma, and we expect that in the States at the end of June, early July. So all of a sudden we will have two CAR-T products that could become available to us at some point in time, well, in the next 3 or 4 months. And, we can talk a little bit about the differences between the J&J and the Bristol Myers product. At that point in time, we will also have an idea about the cost of these treatments. And I expect that to be very pricey. And we can talk about that a little bit and what the process is for CAR-T and myeloma. And, we can go from there. So any other questions I may be able to answer for you at this stage?
Sorry, can I just say as well, I've obviously messed up my time difference, which was why I came in at this late time. So I do apologize for that.
But either way, Lisa, we look forward to visiting with you again in 2 months from now, May 27th.
Yeah.
And, in the meantime, all I can say is best wishes to all of you guys. Jay is the hero of the month, having achieved stringent complete response, MRD negativity after coming out of stem cell transplant. So we're all happy for Jay. But, be well, everybody, and we look forward to seeing you 2 months from now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Before we go, I'm just going to run through a few announcements. So, like Paul already mentioned, the next support group meeting is going to be on May 27th, 2021, and we will send out an email to invite you all to come to it. So just keep a lookout in your emails. And there's a couple of upcoming events that you might be interested in. So tomorrow, there is a relapsed refractory myeloma patients chapter, and they're going to be talking about the new drug melflufen that has just been approved. And I think that Paul mentioned this too. And then next Tuesday, March 30th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, we will be having our Nutrition and Wellness for Myeloma chapter event. with RN Jane Esselstein. And so she'll be talking about how plant-based eating can improve our health in many different ways. And then on Thursday, April 1st, is the launch of our stem cell transplant chapter. And so we'd love for all of you to come, whether you are considering it or if you've already had a stem cell transplant, and you could share your experiences. And again, we'd just like to thank our community event sponsors, Bristol Myers Squibb, Amgen Oncology, Karyopharm Therapeutics, AbbVie, Adaptive Biotechnologies, Genentech, Oncopeptides, and Takeda Oncology. And thank you all for being here, and we hope you take care, and we'll see you soon.